the bell has rung. So get seated and join Elementary Schooled for today's interview.
Welcome to Elementary Schooled. We are in season 2. I thank you for accepting the invitation. This is Coach Brad Thurber. But will you tell us briefly what you do for a living and why you're in Salt Lake, and then a little bit about how you became a coach?
Sure. So I am a financial advisor. I handle people's investments for them. I work in downtown Salt Lake City. And I have always loved sports. And when my kids got to the age, I was very excited for them to participate in sports. And I've always wanted to coach some, but I had no idea how much I was going to love it. So as soon as my oldest was old enough to play t-ball and soccer and flag football, I started helping coach, and it's just kind of grown from there. I coach basically 2 teams right now. I coach both my twins. I coach a 6th grade going into 7th football team. Tackle football, I've coached them for about 5 years. The more fun one for me, I actually coach, and it was a complete accident that I got into it, but I coach a girls basketball team for my daughter, and she's 6th going into 7th, but most of the girls are 7th going into 8th. She plays up on that team, and I've done that for the last 4 years. So anyway, so very different sports, very different teams, very different experiences, but both very, very fun and rewarding. So perfect.
Tell me about your wife. Does she like sports too?
She does, yeah. In fact, she is the head cheerleading coach at the high school where my older son goes, and so she understands coaching. She understands what it entails and kind of the challenges, but also the rewards that come with it.
It's probably really helpful for you both to understand each other, that you have coach mentality and be able to talk about that.
Yeah, it's definitely a big part of both of our lives. So it's fun. And like I said, some things are very similar when you're dealing with parents and things like that. But in terms of ages and sports, it can be very different, going from basketball or football to cheerleading and vice versa.
Well, I thank you on behalf of all the students and children and teenagers that you're helping in these programs. So thank you to you and your wife. What do you feel like challenges are in coaching children now as opposed to maybe 5 or 10 years ago?
Good question. I think there's a couple of things that have really changed, and I ask the question a lot. For me, it's difficult to know my experience versus my kids' experience. How much of that is the 30-year time gap, 35-year time gap? How much of that is growing up in a smaller town in Montana versus the Wasatch Front and Salt Lake City area? But I think absolutely the things that have changed about youth sports is it's just gotten to be such a big, like you said, there's more resources. It's a machine now, and you don't have to be on the super competitive side, but the positives and negatives of that. The positives are, like I said earlier, there's a place for kids to play sports, whatever the sport is, and whatever level they want to be invested in, whatever level they want to engage in, however intense they want to be, there's a place for them, and there's other kids at that level. Whereas when I was growing up, whether you were a superstar or barely got on the field, you were on the same team, and so we had a little bit fewer resources. But the downside to that, in my opinion, is that as parents, it's really easy for us to get over involved in youth sports, and I'm guilty of it myself, to where we really can just suck the fun out of it. Kids, there's so many training opportunities, there's so many coaches out there. I know so many parents, and again, ourselves included, that the kids' schedule, and my wife and I have this conversation all the time. The thing I think is awesome about today's sports world for youth is, regardless of how much time you want to spend, what your skill level is, there's a place, I think, for everybody to play the sports that they like, whether that's football, basketball, baseball, soccer. I think you can find a home for your kids, regardless of based on how much time they want to invest and how seriously they want to take it.
Yeah, I agree. We have a lot more clubs and teams and resources now than we had like when I was growing up, and probably you're probably the same.
That I really feel like the biggest change, and I understand it as a parent, is that it's just become more competitive, and it's almost turned into a business or a job for these kids, where they're spending so much more time playing sports that I think we can suck the fun out of it. Sometimes they burn out earlier. Again, there's kids that just love it and will do it all day long until they can't do it anymore. But I think for a lot of kids, too much too early can be a little bit detrimental.
What's the advice you give on not being over involved, and maybe how to manage that? And maybe it'll teach all of us a little something.
Yeah, that again, that's hard, because I don't think that's wrong for everybody. You just got to know your child. That's the biggest thing. I think the most important thing, if your child is one that, and even in my own 3 kids, they're all different. My 12-year-old son, he can play sports 12 hours a day, and he plays with his friends and he loves it, and he would do that every day if he had the chance. Whereas my other 2 like their downtime, and they like just hanging out with friend time. And so I think the most important thing for us as parents is to know your child, to push him as much as he or she wants to be pushed, but not to the point where you're pushing them more than they want to be pushed. And that's the balance that we are constantly trying to find in my house. Is my kids will tell my wife things that they don't tell me, because they know I'm the coach and I'm the one that's always pushing. And so it's hard, because sometimes they'll tell her, I don't want to go to this practice or training. But when I ask them, it's like, oh yeah, I'm good. I'm good to go. And so as parents, we have to really be, I think, aware just of our kids' boundaries, limits, and what they want to do, to make sure that we're not pushing them harder than they want to be pushed.
No, I think that's a really good point. What can you offer in terms of how to figure out, well, when you said you have one child that's really into it, would do it all day long, what if you have the child that kind of needs something? What advice can you give to parents if they just are having a hard time finding their niche?
Right. No, that would be my older son. He loved football, but never wanted to play tackle football. So he's played flag football his whole life and absolutely loves it. He loved baseball for a while, and then he was pitching and got hit by a line drive and just never really wanted to go back after that. So he gave up baseball. Now he golfs. He never really got into soccer too much, but he, compared to my other 2, has played a much more variety of sports. He's more well-rounded. And again, what I always tell parents is there's absolutely, like, that's good in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways, his youth sports experience, while being completely different than my other 2, is much better for him long-term, because he will play golf. He hasn't played tennis, but he's played more sports at a wider variety than my younger 2 who have specialized more earlier. But again, for them, they knew what they liked and what they didn't like. And so there's opportunities for all of them. So I think for parents, I would try everything that your kid wants to sign up for. If they want to try it, let them, because you never know, and that's, again, one of the challenges. These kids get to be 9 and 10, and a lot of them have played in a sport for 3 or 4 years, and you think, oh, well, this is who they are. Kids from 10 to 13 are going to change drastically. Puberty, everything else. The kids that are really good football and basketball players at 9 and 10, there's a very good chance that those are not going to be the good football and basketball players at 12 and 13. And so, they should try tennis, they should try golf, they should try all these, as many things as you can fit in, to see what they like. As long as they're enjoying it, then I think you just go as long as you can, let them try as many things as you can for as long as you can, until they gravitate to one. And it happens naturally. I got a call from one of our football players yesterday, his mom, a text from his mom that said, we're really, really sad, but we just can't do football this year. We play baseball, we have a ranch, like we do all these different things. And as much as we love football and we've loved having you as a coach, we just can't make it work. And so eventually, as kids get older, that process just happens. They gravitate towards one or the other. But I think the longer you can do it, the better it will be for your child.
You said a couple really critical things in there that I think that we have to constantly remind ourselves of is, first of all, they need to be enjoying it. And of course, we know there are times they're not going to enjoy it. They don't want to go to a
Right.
practice or whatever. But overall, your child should be enjoying what they're doing. Am I right about that?
Yes. And I'll tell you the trick that I've used on that might be really helpful for parents is once a child signs up for a team, he's committed. We don't quit mid-season. We don't go for a week and decide that it's too hard. If you don't want to sign up, that's fine. But once you sign up, you're committed to that team or sport until that session is over. And that, with my younger son, he played baseball for a long time. And then once the season was over, he was like, Dad, I think I'm done. And it broke my heart at the time. But he waited till the end of the season. He went to the coach himself at 9 and said, I don't think I want to play baseball anymore. Here's the reasons why I'm doing. And once they commit to it for that season, that session, that team, whatever it is, they see it through.
Thank you. No, I think that's really important. And what we teach our kids with that is pretty powerful, that we commit. So even though this may not end up being your thing, we're okay with that. We can accept that, but we made a commitment. We're going to follow through. Can I add, and I know this is rare because it's been rare for our family after all these years of having coaches and including dance coaches and all of a variety from kids ages 26 to 15. I will say the only time that we have ever broken our commitment was the one time when we had, I don't want to say emotionally abusive, but almost. We did have a coach that was very demeaning, and we lasted a lot longer than I thought we would. I know other parents were really upset, others left the team, and that's the only time we got to kind of almost the end and we were just done. But that's because I saw how it was really affecting my child. And so I hate to say that because it sounds so negative, but we do see that sometimes. Am I right?
Yes, no, and absolutely. If your son is or daughter, sorry, if your child is on a team where they are being treated that way, then yeah, absolutely. That's an exception to the rule.
What are the things that you see kids really developing by being on a team?
Right. That's a long list, but a couple of probably the most important ones for me. One, absolutely being able to function and communicate with other kids their age on a team. That's what I love about football. To me, it's kind of the ultimate team sport. It doesn't matter if you're big or small, fast or not so fast. There's almost always a spot for you somewhere on the football field. And I don't know if it's the contact, the gear that you wear, but I just feel like football especially is great at bonding kids together, kind of like I don't want to get out of control, but a little bit of a going to battle feeling where those kids, you're really pitted up against another group of kids, and it's pretty physical and not violent at this age, but when you've played a football game, even at 9 or 10. And so I think just learning to, one, rely on other kids, and two, let them rely on you is huge at this age. And being able to learn those lessons early on. And then secondly, being able to do hard things. And I know that's cliche, we say it all the time, but no matter what the sport is, if the coach is doing his job, you're getting pushed. And whether that's physically, mentally, both, not in a negative way, but I believe that, and there's lots of other ways to do it, but youth sports for me is the vehicle to push my kids to develop a work ethic, to do things they don't always want to do, like I said, go to practice, to be accountable, and to other kids to know that they're expected to do certain things. All of those lessons to me are taught really, really well if done right through youth sports. And sorry, one more thing I'll add, again, the kind of difference in experiences. My older son, who's just finished his sophomore year of high school now, he was never on the best teams, and he lost a lot of games, but man, he developed so much perseverance and so much grit by not being on the best teams all the time, that as a 16-year-old now, he is a much better person because of it. And it took him a long time to realize that. He's now getting to the point where he appreciates and realizes that, versus my twins who have always been on kind of better teams and they've won a lot. And he always has to remind them, I played a lot of years of basketball. We never won a tournament. And they kind of are a little more entitled because their experience has been different. But for him, even though it was a more difficult experience, I think it was better for him in the long run. It's been good for his character.
Oh, I love that. How do you tame the highly competitive child or channel it in the right way? What's the best thing a parent or coach can do?
I was going to say, I don't tame it. Like, I embrace that and love that. But for sure, you have to channel it the right way. And I can see, I have very little experience in an elementary school setting. So you'll have to, back to your original question about, on the playground and things like that. I don't have a lot of experience there, but with my kids, I am completely fine with the competitiveness as long as they understand kind of what that means and what that takes. And what I mean by that is, if you're going to be competitive, that's fine, but you can't be mad about losing if you haven't put the work in. If you put the work in and you've done everything you can and you still lose and that makes you mad, certainly you need to know how to channel it. You need to know how to respond. But I'm okay with you being a little bit mad about losing. I don't think that's unhealthy. Where it gets unhealthy, like you were saying, is if that competitive nature turns into the thing that drives me crazy is fighting, for sure, or even whining, like, oh, the refs, we would have won that game if it wasn't for blah blah blah. And that's just an excuse. And if you lose, you lose. And I really believe this, and maybe not at the younger ages, but where my kids are at 12, I think the more competitive you are, the more you understand that you're going to lose some games and you don't like it. But
sure.
I think you're better at dealing with it, because at the end of the day, as long as you know that you did everything you could possible, even if you lose, whether it's an individual sport or a team sport, you have respect for the people that beat you. And so I think you can be highly competitive and still respect the other team. You can be mad that you lost, but I really believe you put in the work, and because you've put in that work, you appreciate and respect the work that they've put in to be better than you. And so I don't mind the competitiveness, but for sure, yeah, if it's turning into fighting and making excuses, bullying, name calling, that kind of stuff when you lose, poor sportsmanship, to put a name on it, I don't know that that's necessarily an attribute of competitiveness. I could see where it is, but I don't know that those are necessarily mutually combined or linked.
Really, really good advice. If you ever see that with one of your players, what do you do? Do you pull them aside, or is it a huddle? What do you do?
Yeah, no, you need to pull them aside. And this sounds like very much coach bias, but frankly, the kids like on my football team where we would see most of that, we don't see that. And honestly, we've talked before that we could use a little more of that, maybe. Like, we have really nice kids, and sometimes as coaches, we would love to see a little more fire and maybe a little more competitiveness. A little more
It goes both ways. Yeah,
exactly. And so I haven't had a lot of personal experience of having to pull a kid aside, but we had a game last year, and there was a kid on the other team that really had a meltdown in the middle of the game, and it was a playoff game. It was a big deal. His dad is the head coach, a good friend of mine. He's a great coach. And walking through the line, the kid was just in tears and yelling, and he wouldn't give high fives to some of the kids. And the dad pulled him aside right there, and me, and said, "What's the problem?" And I had a lot of respect for him doing that, because we had a conversation with his son. At the moment, his dad was very calm about it, but I thought, man, if that was my kid, that's exactly how I would handle it. I would pull him aside one-on-one. He even brought me in as the other coach and said, "Okay, what was the issue?" We talked about what had happened, and he handled it really well. So I think you absolutely have to pull him aside one-on-one. There's no reason to have that conversation in front of a group.
I love that. First of all, we're going to be private about this, but and two of you standing there, I can't imagine how great for that child to know I'm supported here. I have two eyes on me, and asking, what is the problem? And sometimes the problem really has nothing to do with actually is going on the field, I'm guessing, or at least for us, the problem is not necessarily what was happening on the playground, but what's going on inside that child in other ways. And we ask a fun question: have you ever lost it?
That's a relative term, but yes, I have, and there's yeah, more than I would want to. And I thought about this when I saw that question. Almost every game I can think of one interaction that I had, and I've had multiple times where I've gone to the kid either the next day at practice, or I've even, texted his parents that night or whatever, because my kids are still young. Most of them don't have their own cell phones, and we don't communicate that way.
Sure.
But there's been plenty of times where I've felt badly after a game for an interaction that I've had with a player. And that doesn't necessarily mean I lost it, but even just getting after him for a split second, I can still feel bad about it later. And I don't think there's a coach, at least I would hope not. I don't know that there's a coach out there that would ever feel like, oh, that kid deserved it. I got after him, but he really deserved it. Yeah, because they're still kids, and at the end of the day, this is for fun.
And they're learning.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. So I don't know that I've ever like completely lost it, but there have definitely been times when later I've had to go to that player and say, I know I really got after you on this. This is why I was upset. I'm sorry. I'll try not to do that again. But it doesn't happen a lot, but sometimes that does happen. Can I add one more thing?
Yes, please.
This is the sad part of that. When I think about that, it's even harder to do that with my own kids than other people's kids on the team. Like to go to my own son or daughter and say, I'm sorry, I got after you more than I should have. Like sometimes that's harder. I worry less about their feelings than the other kids, and it should be this exact same or even easier if it's your own child. So
what mistakes do you see parents making on the sidelines sometimes, and how do you handle that? And what can you offer to parents with that?
Yeah, good question. I think there's two things that maybe are sort of common challenges of parents. And again, as a parent, I have the same challenges. Number one, as we talked about earlier, is looking very short term. How did my child play that game? What was his experience in that game? And not, again, taking a longer view of, is he having fun? Is he developing? Is he learning these life lessons? All the reasons that we want him to play these sports. And again, I know it's hard. We have expectations, and when those expectations aren't met, we get frustrated. And so the calls that I get, and not a lot of them, but are, what do we need to do better? And I have kids sometimes, in both basketball and football. The kind of classic line, and it's very fair, is, Coach, what do I need to do to get more playing time? And so in terms of like, that's a great question. And sometimes I can just say right there, here's 2 or 3 things you need to work on. And sometimes I have to say, okay, let me think about that and get back to you at the next practice. And I know that is sort of directed from the parents, and it's completely fair. And that's
you appreciate that more coming from the child than coming from the parent, right? Like you don't want to text saying, why isn't my child getting more playing time? You do appreciate that.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, and I don't even mind the text from the parents, that we have, and I think a lot of teams do this now, but we have kind of a general rule of, if you're frustrated, don't come up to us after the game, wait 48 hours. Football games are always on Saturdays. Wait till Monday, and then, talk to me about it, because you need time to settle down. I just finished a game. I'm not in a place where I really probably am ready to have this conversation anyways. But most of those conversations are around very short windows. And so the 2 things I tell parents, one is, just be patient. Like, your child, so much is going to change, that as long as they're having fun and getting better, that the rest of that will generally work out. And then 2 is, another thing that I think a challenge that parents have is, if you only come to games, you don't see what the coaches see. For whatever team you have, you probably are practicing 2 or 3 times as many hours as you're playing games, regardless of the sport. And so I would encourage parents, if you're frustrated, or if you think your child's being treated unfairly by a coach, or the coach is playing favorites, go to the practices and watch and see how engaged your child is, or how he's performing. Before you have those conversations with parents, I would encourage them to go and watch a couple of practices to see, evaluate, try and be objective, and kind of evaluate and see what the coaches are seeing. Because we just see so much, there's so much more time invested that we have with the players outside of just the games, that a lot of times the parents only see the games.
That's the critical time, the work time, the practice. Yeah. So that's great advice. I guess I feel like you've given so much good information for any parent, coach, teacher, aunt, uncle, anyone that's just trying to support kids these days. I'd like to end with our personal experience. You had kind of a long-term impact by a coach, and that it affected you off the field just as much. Can you say a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Growing up with the football coach that I had, he was very impactful on just how we lived our lives, how we handled business, how we handled ourselves, and very strict that way and disciplined. But the second part of that I think is equally important as coaches or teachers, whether it's at school, at church, in sports, that's a significant mantle that we're taking on, and you need to take that seriously. When I think about the amount of hours that I will spend, and I've been fortunate to kind of coach my way up with these kids, both football and basketball. I've had the same group year after year after year. But when I think about the amount of hours that those kids will spend with me during their lifetime, from age 8 to age 15 or 16, when they get to high school, outside of their parents, I'll be like number 2 or 3 or 4 on that list of people that they will have spent the most time with growing up. And that is significant. And if I'm not creating, positive, if I'm not a positive example for them, then I've really missed the boat. I've missed an opportunity there. So I just think being a youth coach is a huge opportunity, but a real mantle. And I mean that very sincerely. That's not just coaches speak, but the amount of time that those kids are going to spend with me over their lifetime, that is a huge opportunity to do good.
Thank you. I hear what you're saying completely, and I very much connect with that, because there was a shift in my teaching, much like of what you're saying about coaching, when I realized that before I'm the teacher, I'm really the learner. That's when my teaching, and there are days, trust me, in the classroom where you're like, oh, she's not that great of a teacher. But on the on days are really, really great. And I think it's probably very similar to coaching. I do always try to end with a little bit of a spiritual note. I hope that's okay. This is just a little line that resonated with me this time after reading it recently in the Bible, in Mark 9, and it says, whosoever shall receive one of such children receiveth me. And I always think of any way we're dealing with kids, we are instruments in God's hands. And I just believe that. And it kind of comes back to the whole reason why I started this podcast, because I really do believe that when we strengthen a child, we do strengthen society, because then they have these tools and these skills that they can use, and there's confidence in that. And we're seeing so many problems in our society and so many fears that kids come with and have. But when they can channel this stuff, it's really cool to see them progress and flourish and to work something out on the playground or on the field. And so thank you for all that you've offered today. What you do really matters. And I hope you and your coaches and all the coaches that you lead really feel that it matters. It's a big deal. You are shaping these kids. So thank you for the offerings that you gave us today.
Thanks for having me. No, it's been a lot of fun.
Thanks for being part of today's class. To submit a question or topic for further episodes, please email elementary.schooled@outlook.com. School is out for today, but please remember, when we strengthen a child, we strengthen society.